Howdy! Welcome! This is the final Sit and Sip with Dr. Megan Rose. It's me, for the year at least. I have some exciting plans after the first of the year for some new Sit and Sips, and I'm really excited to begin to leak that out a little bit. But for now, this is it for the rest of the year. 'Tis the season. And so today we're going to be discussing ecosexuality and spirit sex. Ooh. So for those of you who were with me last week, thanks for coming back and coming back again and again and again and give me such fabulous interaction and feedback on these Sit and Sips. It's really meant so much to me. You know, just as an aside, I've been working on this material, as I've often said, for like over 20 years. And for a good portion of it, I was kind of like, you know, keeping it really close to my chest, not really talking about it publicly because, you know, number one, if you've had any of these kinds of experiences, you know that they can be a little like, is this okay? What's going on here? Am I the only one? And then, you know, even as I began to collect information and research and validation of my experience, there was still this sort of like seal that was on the material because that I was deep with it. I was in a really deep incubation phase. And so these Sit and Sips, these past 6 weeks, have been sort of me breaking the seal. And beginning to talk in a very public way about things that have been very private and very precious to me. So I really appreciate the support and the feedback and just the encouragement that y'all have been giving me in these. I know that they have been meaningful to you, and it's been meaningful to me to be able to share them with you. So this is, as I said, week 6 of the 6-week series. And today we're going to go for a little bit longer, probably about an hour. And then at the end, I'll be sharing with you more about today's topic and how you can learn more. And as always, I'll answer any questions you have. So if it's anything major, hold on to it until then so they don't get lost in the chat feed. All right, Havala, welcome, Vivian. Thank you for being here. Hi, Raina from Miami. Oh, Deborah. Oh gosh, it's so lovely to see all of my friends and colleagues and folks that I have just met, you know, because of this series on the Facebook Live tonight. So let's start with just a couple of my favorite quotes. The first one is from women's sexuality teacher and author Dr. Jalaja Bonheim. And she says, "The image of God, or I would say goddess, as lover is ancient, and it permeates all religious traditions. Ecstatics revel in the imagery of sexual love because no other human experience reflects so accurately the nature of what transpires between the soul and God in the secret chambers of the heart. Since the dawn of history, mystics have celebrated this love affair between the transcendent spirit and the incarnate human soul." You're going to get a lot of mms from me today. And the next quote is from medieval German mystic Meister Eckhart. And he said, "All who make love with spirit will conceive and become pregnant with an otherworldly joy. They will nurture a pure, innocent, and unsullied spirit that radiates divine love out into the world. And they will give birth to acts of compassion and beauty." Sign me up, right? Sign me up. If you sign up for that, drop a thumbs up or a sign me up in the chat, because that sounds good to me. So for those of you who are just joining us, you're tuned in to Sit and Sip with Dr. Megan Rose, and we're discussing ecosexuality and spirit sex this week. So, a little bit about me. A little bit more about me than you've gotten these past few weeks. As I've said, I'm Dr. Megan Rose, and I'm here to help you get greater clarity and confidence in your intimate relationships with the spirits. As a highly sensitive person and an erotic mystic, my spirituality has always been intertwined with my sexuality. I know what it's like to have spontaneous consciousness-raising erotic experiences with both humans and with spirits, and to long for a place and people to share them with. I'm also what I call a visionary heretic, which basically means I'm really conscious about how what we choose to believe in shapes who we are and the world that we create. It's why I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life to researching and practicing erotic mysticism and spirit communication. I now help other erotic mystics and visionary heretics like myself cultivate safe, sane, and secure relationships with the spirits, and sometimes with humans too, so they can more fully express their own sexy, weird self. So today we're going to dive into a topic that I've been studying for well over 20 years, and which often I think actually leads to my area of expertise, which is spirit marriage. So ecosexuality, spirit sex often is sort of like the precursor to having bonded, intimate relationships with spirits that one may call a marriage. But before we go there, I'd love to learn a bit about who's here today. So type in the comments where you're joining us from if you haven't already, and maybe one word that represents what you'd like to receive today out of this talk. So while you're doing that, Vivian says, "Sign me up ASAP." Hello, Jonathan Harvey. So glad you're here. All right, so Aaron is coming to us from Pittsburgh. All right, so as those come in, I'm going to just keep moving and sipping. So I'm really thrilled to be sharing this material with you today. It is kind of an edgy topic, and you are super fabulous for being open and curious enough to explore it with me today. So let's just really briefly recap what we've discussed in our last 5 sit and sips. And the reason I like to do this is because each of these chats really builds upon the other. I designed them to be sort of like, stacking Lego bricks that stack together and give you a nice whole picture. So over the last 5 weeks, we've laid the foundation for today's talk by exploring the ideas of normalizing the paranormal, animism and reenchantment, spirit marriage, conscious evolution and co-creation, and then last week we discussed the divine self. So we began our first week by decolonizing our ways of knowing and constructing knowledge and rethinking, really questioning our ideas about what's normal versus paranormal. And then the next week, we talked about how the earth is a living, breathing intelligence full of animate life and animate, intelligent life at all levels of consciousness. And we discussed how we can re-enchant our lives by becoming a participant in the cosmos rather than just an observer, and how we mostly do this through story, myth-making, and embracing the mystery. Then we talked about developing intimate, bonded relationships with otherworldly beings, what I call spirit marriage, and how spirit marriages can help us evolve our species by stepping into co-creative relationship and consciously evolving with our other than human allies. And then finally, last week, we discussed the divine self, how that even if we don't have a spirit companion yet, we all have a rarefied divine aspect of ourself that we can develop intimacy with. All right. So, just looking over here to see where folks are joining us from. Palo Alto, San Francisco Bay Area. I know some of y'all are from Santa Cruz Mountains, so welcome everyone. Today we're going to explore a topic that has actually been piquing a lot of interest and sparking a lot of discussions lately, and that's the idea that we can have intimate bonded relationships with Earth, what's sometimes called ecosexuality. And then in fact, there are many otherworldly beings that we can develop intimacy with that are sort of embedded within the consciousness of Earth or Gaia. So first, I kind of want to tell you a little bit about why this topic is so near and dear to my heart. Around 20 years ago, really what launched this whole research endeavor, I was in my early 30s and I had a powerful spiritual activation, sometimes called a Kundalini Awakening. But this activation, it lit me up like a Christmas tree. And I was so open and bright and it all felt really good. But then all of a sudden I was also becoming kind of a magnet for the spirits. I soon discovered that some spirits were interested in, let's just say, a more intimate relationship with me than others were. And one or two even kind of proposed marriage, kept saying, I want to marry you. But I had no clue what was going on. At the time, I was what I like to call pagan light. I'd been to a few events like the spiral dance and the witch's ball, but I didn't have a tradition or a formal teacher. And although these erotic spirit encounters could be amazing, they also sometimes left me feeling a little exposed or vulnerable and sometimes a little confused. You know, was I making this all up? Was I going to get possessed against my will? Was this even a thing? So, back in my 20s, I had gone to seminary to study theology and religion. And then in my 30s, I had trained as a holistic healer and a psychic. So I knew there was probably some precedent for this kind of experience. So I put on my researcher hat and I dove into figuring out what was going on. I soon discovered that intimate relationships with spirits was one of the best kept secrets hidden in plain sight in most of the world's religions. So I found a teacher. I initiated into a couple of traditions that taught me grounding and protection and discernment of the spirits, which we'll talk about more in a second. And I began to deepen my relationship with my spirit beloveds. Along the way, it became clear that I was being led to write and to speak about this journey so that other folks who were having these experiences wouldn't feel so lost and alone like I had. And this eventually led me to doing my PhD in transformational spirituality and psychology, and eventually writing a book about this subject, which is coming out in March. All at the behest of my spirit beloveds. I like to say they sort of tapped me on the shoulder and were like, you're going to do this now, and you're going to do it in this way because you've got this academic background, and it'll be great. It'll be really grounded. And I was like, well, okay, all right, that's what we're going to do. So now, after almost 20 years, I'm finally, like I said, breaking the seal on this deeply personal and potent relationship to share the insights, practices, and processes that can help others navigate the sometimes overwhelming realm of intimate relationships with the spirits. So I'm curious, when it comes to intimacy with the spirits, are you struggling with anything right now? If so, what's your biggest hurdle or challenge? If you feel comfortable, write it down for yourself. And if you feel comfortable, you can share it in the chat. I'd love to know kind of what folks are looking to get out of the call today. The presentation, the talk, the Facebook Live. All right. So, all right, we'll continue to move along then. So, the deal is I can't teach you everything I know about ecosexuality and spirit sex in an hour. That's just impossible. So, especially since it's taken me 20 years to pull this research and practice together. So for those of you who really want to cultivate an intimate relationship with spirits, at the end I'm going to share more about how we can continue to work together. So stick around. So, are the spirits ringing your doorbell? Maybe getting a little up close and personal? Maybe there's a particular tree or a lake or a rocky crevasse that tickles your fancy. Or maybe you'd like there to be. If so, you're in the right place. Here's the deal. Bumping joy bits with the other world doesn't have to be overwhelming or unnerving. It can be a source of vitality, awakening, and personal transformation even. So today we're going to get down and juicy with the nature of intimate relationships with Earth and her otherworldly beings. We're going to discuss the keys to successful intimate relationship with Earth and the other world. So we're going to talk about how to cultivate safe and sane spirit intimacy, 3 keys for erotic spirit relationship development, practices and precautions for engaging the spirits in sexy time, and more. So let's dive in. Let me just look over here really quick because I want to check So Deborah is saying she is wondering about what's her projecting, and what's them. Great question. We'll talk about that a little bit. Anne wants to know if I have any thoughts on the jinn. I have lots of thoughts on the jinn, but I'm not going to go there right now. Ask it again at the end if we have time. They are not a otherworldly group that I have a ton of experience in, though, to be totally transparent. But I do know folks that do have experience with them, so if you're looking for a reference, I can send that. And there are some guidelines on working with the jinn that are different than, say, other fairy races. So first, let's dive into some definitions, because you'll know I like my definitions. Let's talk about ecosexuality. What is that even? 2 of my favorite ecosexual activists are Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens. And in their book that just came out, which is called Assuming the Ecosexual Position, the Earth as Lover, they define ecosexuality as this: a person who finds nature romantic, sensual, erotic, or sexy, which can include humans or not. A person who takes Earth as their lover. Someone who has a more expanded concept of what sex and orgasm are beyond mainstream definitions. A person who imagines sex as an ecology that extends beyond the physical body. You can start seeing how it connects into otherworldly beings, or more than human beings. And I love this definition because it really does open us up quite a lot of possibilities when it comes to intimacy with both the natural world, Earth as a being, and then the many otherworldly beings or spirits that we share our planet with. So Una Chowdhury, in the foreword to Annie and Beth's book, writes about ecospheric consciousness. She says that ecospheric consciousness is about listening to Earth with as much interest as we've been listening to ourselves. It involves actual active listening rather than just looking, probing, cutting, labeling, displaying, dissecting. It also involves getting interested. Getting involved, liking, loving, caring, relating to earthy things, wanting to be their friends, lovers, spouses even. She says that when we learn to relate to them, to Earth, in all the complicated ways that have made all our human relationships so engrossing, we'll be on our way to actually inhabiting, instead of distractedly hovering above, our amazing planet. It involves becoming more porous, becoming fungible, becoming curious, becoming desirous. It asks how various bodies, human and more than human, can come together and revitalize the world. Yes! This is what we've been building to over these past 6 weeks, right? How do we develop a consciousness that moves beyond an anthropocentric worldview and sees the rest of our sexy planet as eminently lovable, and with each hallelujah sunset constantly seducing us? Like, that's what Earth does when she shows off. She's seducing us. And it really, I think, can be that simple. So, eco-philosopher Freya Matthews puts it this way: if humans are ever to truly re-inhabit the world, to truly want what we need to want if the world is to flourish, then first we'll need to start thinking of life systems as meaning systems, imbued with psychoactivity as well as physicality, and as subjects and not just objects. So environmentalism needs to be underpinned by panpsychism or animism, I think. But I also think that such an attitude to reality, an intimate and even an erotic relationship with reality, is our key to our own humanity, to the meaning of our own existence. When you step into indigenous communities in which an intimate and erotic relationship with reality has survived, you can hardly fail to notice the contrast. You find a much greater depth of warm humanity there. So ecosexuality is about softening into your landscape enough that you can learn to sense with your extrasensory capabilities the love song of the forest for your heartbeat, right? The climaxing crescendo of the ocean wave as you taste her salty, briny breath. As my favorite artist, Kate Bush, sings in her song, The Sensual World, yes. So can I get a yes? Type it into the chat if you're feeling that. Yes. So let's shift gears a bit, because I want you to also feel really safe and supported in cultivating this kind of level of intimacy with both the ecological and the spirit worlds. Because let's face it, we don't really have a lot of great examples out there. I remember a few years ago, and maybe you remember this too, that there was this fundamentalist Christian doctor who was warning people that endometriosis came from having sex with demons, right? So there's a lot of shite out there. And when you try to Google this stuff, it's just kind of ridiculous. There's not that much useful information. So I want to dispel some of this up front and make spirit sex an expanded definition of ecosexuality, because we're all eco, we're all part of this planet, or even cosmic sexuality, right? So first of all, the first thing I want to say is that sex with Earth or the spirit world does not follow the same rules or logic as human sex does. Just doesn't. Many otherworldly beings have, by their very nature, a vitalizing effect on the human nervous system. And by vitalizing, I mean they touch into our vitality, which is our erotic energy, or our enlivening, our animating energy. And so by merit of the fact of that, this vitalizing effect on the human nervous system, it can feel to us like eroticism or sexual contact. But that's not necessarily, by and large, their intention. Often, sometimes it's just them ringing our doorbell, like I like to say. So just because that we feel aroused or even have a physiological sexual response to their presence doesn't mean they're trying to have sex with us. Especially, I think it's important to understand that those of us who have sexual trauma or a trauma history, having a spirit encounter that is vitalizing, that feels really erotic, even if it's not the agenda of the spirit being, it can end up being really triggering for us. I didn't consent to this. Why am I feeling this? So I just want to lay it out there that just because that you're experiencing a vitalizing effect with the spirit doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to have sex with you. However, that is a possibility. We can have erotic encounters with spirits, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But the first key then is learning discernment of the spirits. We need to understand who we are interacting with and what their agenda is. So discernment. We also need to learn to discern when we're projecting our own wounds and fears out onto the other world. So the issue is we can easily be confused by the eroticism we perceive from the other world, and then become worried about our own agency and consent and even the impact on our own human relationships. So, don't get me wrong, we can definitely enjoy erotic sexual relationships with the spirit world and that are consensual on both sides. But to get there, we first need to really be able to discern who we want to have that kind of an encounter with, right? When we want to have it, where we want to have it, and why, and then set some ground rules, kind of like you would hopefully do with a human sexual partner, right? So here's a little side story. After that Kundalini Awakening experience, when I was first being contacted by the spirits, I felt like I had a big neon sign on the top of my head that was just flashing open, open, open for business. I kind of felt like I was a cosmic slut because, sometimes I just had spirits sidle up to me and want intimacy, and I wasn't so sure about it. Could I trust them? What was their agenda? And then what was even my own preconditioning around certain kinds of spirits? Like, what did my conservative Pentecostal Christian upbringing and then just the American culture of spiritual skepticism unconsciously program into me about spirits that may or may not actually be true? So I had to learn how to get really good at being my own bouncer. Also, just like in a human relationship, I had to take the time to get to know the spirits and ease into the relationship that I decided I wanted to cultivate with them. Because just because someone wanted to work with me or some spirit wanted to work with me didn't mean I was open for business for everybody. I had to build the muscle of discernment. So the biggest myth about cultivating discernment of the spirits is that it's hard, but it's really not. We use our discernment every day to make a million little decisions. You can hone your discernment by practicing with various divination tools like a tarot, or a pendulum, an oracle deck, etc., etc. But ultimately, discernment is rooted in your intuition. And your body is one of the best discernment tools that you have. Learning to hear what a clear yes or a clear no feels like in your body is key to cultivating discernment. So let's just take a quick second and practice cultivating body discernment right now. So if you want, you can close your eyes and just listen. But I want you to imagine something or someone that you love. Maybe it's a parent or a child, a pet, a favorite place in nature, an image, really anything that lights you up and brings you joy. So just take a moment and imagine that. Now, notice what you're feeling. Notice what you're seeing or hearing associated with this person or thing or place. It may be a sensation in your body in a particular place. It could be a color, could be a sound or a scent. Just take a moment and see if you can associate with that image how your body is feeling. Sometimes our heart feels open, or certain places in our body feel open. Just notice that. This is what a somatic yes feels like for you. Got it? Okay. Now, imagine something that you don't like, something that shuts you down or makes you frustrated or angry. It could be anything. The sound of an alarm buzzing in the morning. That's one. That's a really, that's something that gets me. So again, just notice the sensations associated with it in your body. Any colors or sounds or energies. So this is a somatic no for you. And sometimes we get a maybe or a not yet. And this can just feel sort of more like neutral, muted, or a lesser version of a yes or no. Taylor Mack, who's a performance artist, has this great quote. And they say, "My drag mother, Mother Flawless Superior, said, 'You're the boss, applesauce.' And that means you are in charge of your own story." So I love that. I love that quote. We totally get to boss the spirits around. Yeah, I'm going to say that again. We totally get to boss the spirits around. We get to tell them what we're okay with and what we're not okay with, and who we want to work with and who we don't want to work with. And if they don't feel like a strong yes to us or a strong no, either way, we can date them a bit to learn more about them, or we can thank them for their visit and ask them to move along. So Your mission, should you choose to accept it, for the discernment practice today, is to notice how you feel yes or no in your body. Get really familiar with that voice or sensation or image or however it shows up for you. And when you notice it in the little everyday things, you'll be able to recognize it then for the bigger decisions. And play the field, date around, and see what works for you with the different spirits. You know, as long as you're not getting a strong no, you can explore things. This is where ecosexuality can be really useful, actually. Because if you're having an erotic encounter with, say, a tree, it tends to feel less dangerous, right, than with a discarnate entity that you may or may not have a name or an identity or cosmology for. So ecosexuality is great because we can start working with like nature and practicing with the nature spirits. So tell me, does this resonate at all with you? What are ways that you've learned to discern the spirits? I'm just going to take a moment here because y'all have been chatting here in the chat and see what kinds of things you've been saying. So, all right. Jonathan said that over 20 years of research in 1 hour averages to covering 4 months of research per minute. Yeah, right. Robin wants to know about keeping the connection when I have to deal with my 3D life. Yeah, that's a great question. And Vivian is saying life systems equals meaning systems. Fantastic. And I got an yes. How do we avoid sexually harassing the spirits? Do you mean, Deborah, do you mean how do we avoid sexually harassing them, or how do we avoid spirits that are sexually harassing us? That's unclear. Robin says that they used shamanic journeying to ask their guides to vet your lover. Perfect. Vivian likes the idea of dating a spirit in order to discern. Jonathan says different spirits have different flavors. Absolutely. Kathy says, yeah. Aaron says, thank you for the information about a somatic yes and no. There's been a spirit or two that have approached me that I told no, but one of which I was wondering that they were feeling a yes. Yes, us harassing them is part of our response. That's a legit question, Deborah, in that, you know, sometimes because we're having these erotic experience with the spirit, or it's registering as erotic in our body, we get kind of attached to the idea that it's always got to be erotic. And I mean, think of it like if you had a human physical partner. If all you ever wanted to do with that human physical partner was have sex with them, and you didn't want to like have conversations or, you know, go out, you know, for walks or go on dates, or, you know, you get what I'm driving at, they would probably get a little tired of it, you know, depending on the nature of and the agreement of your relationship, right? And the purpose of your relationship. I mean, maybe your relationship is just about having sex, but if it's not, if it's actually like about a mutual exchange of ideas and vitality and curiosity and, you know, building a dynamic between the two of you, then you're going to want to do other things. And so what I've experienced with the spirit world is that when I became too reliant on the erotic nature, my spirit would back way off and would kind of be like, you know, you need to re-examine what's going on here, and also have to work on reaching them, the dating stuff, right? Like reaching through them and having regular communion time with them that wasn't just about eroticism. All right, I'm going to move on and then I'll look back in a second. Okay, so ceremonial magician Donald Tyson says, there is nothing inherently dangerous or perverse or evil about sex with the spirit. It's just the opposite. A study of historical accounts and ancient legends have led me to conclude that loving and erotic unions with angels are a precious gift that should be cherished. The crucial feature of these relationships is love. Love invokes the goddess herself and allows union with the spirit to be simultaneously union with Shakti, or the goddess. And he says angels, but he also sort of uses angels and spirits interchangeably. So that's why key number 2, we talked about discernment, key number 2 is devotion. Devote yourself to a trusted deity, spirit, or ecological being. It really is like dating, right? Some folks are really good at dating many people at once, and they have a knack for open communication and agreement setting. Wonderful. However, the downside of dating around for some folks is that your relationships can sometimes end up being a little more superficial. Now, there's nothing wrong with dating around and having lots of sexy adventures. Remember, we're sex positive here. But if you are worried about getting involved in a questionable situation because you don't know someone very well, then it can really behoove you to spend some time devoting yourself to getting to know that person, whether they are in a human body or not. So tend your relationships like you would a human one. Tend your spirit relationships like you would a human one. And honestly, after this past year and a half, a lot of folks are feeling really lonely and isolated and may have even given up on having a meaningful erotic relationship with a human. It's just kind of complicated and disappointing. So the great thing about ecosexuality and spirit sex is you don't have to worry about human complications, right? I used to think that a devotional relationship had to reside within the confines of an orthodox spiritual tradition. You know, like with a deity or an elevated being of some kind. And certainly these kinds of relationships tend to be on the more obvious side of spirit contact, right? Devotion to a deity. But throughout my years of research, I've discovered folks are having intimate, devoted relationships with all kinds of entities, from giant sequoia redwood trees to David Bowie. In fact, and some of you who are on here will chuckle as I say this, dead rock stars here in the United States tend to be a really popular spirit companion / lover / partner. And I have some ideas about why that is. And at first I thought it was like odd. And then I ended up interviewing an Ungan, a Haitian Vodou priest, who was married to a famous documentary filmmaker, deceased. And I thought, well, you know, if that's possible, why isn't it possible that we would step into these relationships with these beings who were fairly elevated, like, you know, a saint or a demigod were in their particular context, in their particular tradition, here in the U.S., where, you know, we sort of are a little transgressive and finding our own way with these things because we don't have a lot of hardcore lineage around this as a culture. So why not? And as long as your discernment of those spirits is that they are benevolent, right, and beneficent and want your best, want what's best for you, have at it. So for your devotional practice, I invite you to devote yourself to getting to know an extraordinary contact, be it a deity, your local flora or fauna, or even a beloved dead. Pick someone that feels resonant, that evokes your sensual side, and that you feel safe exploring. Remember, it doesn't have to be a forever relationship, just one that you're willing to spend some time getting to know. And the bottom line is, like any relationship, you've got to spend time together. So go for it. Date around, and when you find a being that excites you a bit, woo it like you would a human one. The poet and author Sophie Strand, in her essay, The Body is an Ecodelic, explains it this way. Where is your ecological niche? Where is the sore spot in your landscape that needs the shape of your body? The press of your tender foot. Where can you place yourself like an acupuncture needle in the mountain, the clear-cut forest, the web of relations that you yourself are woven from. Place me where I can melt into medicine. Place me on the tongue of the one who needs my taste. Yummy. So, how does this all sit with you? What kinds of deities or spirits or natural features out of nature do you feel most drawn to? Comment over here, and I'm going to look and see what we've been chatting, what y'all have been chatting with while I've been talking away. Okay. So, important to mind your vibe, Anne says. You can occasionally bring in stuff resonating at different levels and willingly disguising itself as something else if one gets funky. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit in a second, Anne, when we talk about discipline and what I call magical bodybuilding. So would that mean, Kathy wants to know if that would mean that this spirit is trying to let me know it wants to date, and so should I stop ignoring it? I guess I didn't see the previous comment there, Kathy, but if you do have a spirit that's ringing your doorbell, it might want you to date it a little bit and get to know it. Yeah. Erin says that David Bowie visited her once as well. Yeah, Bowie has been on in my field as well. He's a very busy person in the afterlife. All right. So, all the really cool female rock stars are still alive, Jonathan says. Well, in our generation, I mean, Edith Piaf is dead. She was fabulous. And so is Josephine Baker. She was fabulous. I guess they're not rock stars, but they are in my brain because that's how my mind works. All right. Okay, so we're going to move on here. So finally, our third key is discipline. Cultivate your erotic, magical body daily. So we have our 5 mundane senses, right? But I've also mentioned that we have these extrasensory capabilities as well. These extra senses arise from and expand upon our regular senses, like expanded sight, expanded hearing, expanded sensation, to name just a few. So you've probably heard these terms, right? Like clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. It's these extra senses that support and evolve our magical body, just like our regular senses support and uphold our physical body. So to develop and expand our extrasensory capacities, we need to routinely work on them. It's a little bit like developing a muscle. It takes routine practice over time. And I like to call it magical bodybuilding. So remember when I said I had to build the muscle of discernment? Well, I did that by daily disciplined practice. Every day I did certain practices that helped me not only get really good at discerning spirits' influences versus my own inner aspects. To sort of answer your question earlier, Deborah, I had a daily practice that helped me really get and I had, I worked with folks that helped support me in learning this as well. So I had a spiritual psychotherapist who was really good at working with the spirit realms, and I also worked with a shamanic practitioner. But I also daily did certain practices that helped me really get in touch with what my inner aspects were, what they sounded like, and then what the spirits were that I was working with, what they felt like. Because mostly it's what the spirits feel like. That is important. Their visuals and even their voices can change based on, a variety of different things. So it's more how our body feels when we interact with them that's important. And I also did a lot of exercises that built up the strength and endurance of my energy body. This is kind of what Anne was talking about, so that I had the beef, the muscle, to hold my boundaries against unwanted contact. Or as she was saying, your vibration. You've got this sort of, healthy auric field that buffers you a little bit. So think of it as spiritual or psychic self-defense training. Now don't get me wrong. It's not like the spirits were out to get me, right? But to put it in dating terms, if you're dating around, you want to be able to say no to someone and then have the skills to back that no up if you need to. So you get to decide who you interact with and get up close and personal with, even and probably especially if they're a spirit being. So here's your discipline practice. Whenever you're going to interact with your spirit beloveds, make sure you create a solid container for yourself and for your paramour by creating a sacred space. This is just the very basic practice of this, and then there are other things that you can layer in. But it can be as simple as finding a private room, lighting a candle, and visualizing that room surrounded and protected by an energy field or bubble, or creating an altar and having that be your focal point, your contact point. Or it can be as elaborate as many of the rituals for casting a magic circle that are out there, which you can Google and find lots of information on how to do it if you don't know how to do that. The point is, doing this routinely as part of your contact or your dates supports the discipline and building of a magical body, which in turn fuels the ability to be in an otherworldly relationship. I really like the altar practice, where you have a set up place of contact that you work at every day in interfacing and having a date with your altar every day, just like you would sit down and talk to a human partner. You sit down and talk to your spirit partner or potential partner, right? The person you're dating on a regular daily basis, and you do it in a sort of a ritual or a sacred context. So here's a note about doing stuff outside in nature, because we are talking about eco-spirituality and some of this stuff isn't done inside. If you're connecting to a spirit that is outside in nature, like a tree or a genus loci or any other nature being really, then you don't necessarily need a magical circle. But it is a really good idea to bring offerings to the spirit you're engaging with, like wining and dining them, like, bring them some flowers and gifts. And particularly for those of us who live on colonized land, we want to make sure that our first offering is to the indigenous people who lived there before you. And we talked about this in our first or second sit and sip, so I won't go too much into it, but suffice it to say that you should know who lived on the land before you and bring them a little offering that they would like, something disposable and non-toxic. Never offer chocolate, not out in nature, because animals, it's bad for animals, it's bad for the environment. Then make your offering to your spirit beloved after you've made it to the nature or to the ancestors of the place. And bring your spirit beloved something that they would like. In many cases, if we're working with plant spirits, that offering can be water. Water is a universal offering that you can almost always make. All right, so we are almost at an hour, and I'm going to begin to wrap this up. So I want to give you one final quote, and this one is from my book that's coming out on spirit marriage. To make love to a spirit is to reconnect our bodies in a way that vitalizes them, making them temples of divine awakening, and thereby fostering the alchemy of embodied spirituality. Yum. Okay, so I'd love to hear what you've received so far. If any insights, gems, breakthroughs, it's all welcome. So take a moment and type anything in the chat that you want, and I'm going to look through the conversation up to this point. All right. Robin is saying that their lover is an ET. Yeah, we talk about eco-spirituality as earth-based, but then we have sort of cosmic or ecosexuality, right, as earth-based, but we have cosmic sexuality as well. And that is sort of working with non-indigenous to earth beings. And I won't go into that, but that is totally a possibility. What do you do if you have spirits that want to be intimate with you and are jealous as lovers? Well, what would you do if you had a human partner that wanted to be intimate with you but was super jealous? Ideally, hopefully, they would not be a good fit, right? Because usually jealous lovers, whether they're human or spirit, means that there's some wounding or something that is not necessarily benevolent that's going on there. There's some issues. So I would say, tread lightly there. Now, I say that and then immediately pop into my head one of my co-researchers who told me that, they're married to a Norse deity who's pretty jealous, and but this is a well-established Norse deity who has a lot of veneration and has a lot of practices built up around them. And so in that particular case, where it's a very specific, understood cosmological being, you might have a little more leeway in working with that deity, versus some spirit that you're just sort of trying to get to know, but that is being petty and difficult. All right, so let's just look here for a sec. So some spirits may want to be exclusive, just like humans, and that's up to you. That's up to you if you want to, again, step into an agreement with a spirit that wants exclusivity. I would get really clear. Does that exclusivity mean no other spirit spouses or no other human contact as well? I would be really clear about that, and I would want to I would want to make sure that you know what you're signing up for if they're wanting some exclusivity, because I will tell you that polyamory is kind of the rule for, at least for many spirit marriage practitioners. So what I mean is that they're married to a human or in a bonded human relationship with someone, and they also have spirits that they're married to. Most of the people that I've researched are in what would be sort of considered polyamorous situations, because that they have a spirit spouse or a spirit partner and they have a human partner, and they're negotiating between the two of them. So that is more common than somebody who's just married to a spirit and not involved with anybody else. Although I am one of my co-researchers is married to a very fierce tantric deity, and her devotion is to this goddess. And although the goddess hasn't said that she's has to be exclusive with her, the way that she worships and practices with her doesn't leave a lot of room for her to have mundane human relationships. So it just really depends on the nature of the being. And Lynn says, I long to be held. Well, that is, when our physical body, right, is needing physical contact. But, there are ways that we can get the cuddles and the touch therapy that is a very real need for our physical body, without having to be in sort of like a relationship, and then we can have our spirit contact as well. So there's and maybe not right now with quarantine, or what's going on right now with the COVID situation, but there have been cuddle parties, there is massage, there's different ways that we can get our touch addressed, and then still also be in a bonded relationship. Okay. The Deborah is saying the desire for exclusively in some sense isn't the red flag. Jealousy is a separate bad behavior to be concerned about. Yeah, so the exclusivity isn't necessarily the red flag, it's the jealousy. I'm sorry if I misstated that. The jealousy is more of a sort of, be curious and sort of careful with that spirit. All right, so these have been fantastic shares. Thank you. And in a moment, I'm going to do my Q&A to answer any more questions that you have. But I want to remind you that I do have an upcoming course on spirit marriage. It's starting next week, and you're going to learn a lot more about this and more in-depth practices and techniques related to erotic spirit encounters. And, you know, I continue to want to support you all in feeling grounded and safe and sane in these paranormal and otherworldly experiences. And I really want you to feel fully resourced to support an erotic relationship with a spirit if you want to, if you so choose. And so, you know, that's why I've taken this 20 years of research and turned it into this first of its kind course called Spirit Marriage 101, Cultivating a Bonded Relationship with an Otherworldly Being. So it's a 6-week course during which we'll explore cultivating intimate relationships with spiritual and ecological beings. And it's an opportunity for you to get never before released information on spirit marriage, drawn from my years of research and practice, content from my forthcoming book, and some great one-on-one community support in your practice and inquiry into cultivating a spirit marriage. So, really quickly, because I do want to honor our time commitment, the course information is right there in the chat that Vivian has just put in there. And you're going to get a lot of amazing information on deepening an existing spirit contact or how to reach to a new one, cultivating a sense of agency and sovereignty and personal transformation through your spirit communications. And then those 3 Ds that we talked about, discerning the desired contact from the undesired one, devoting yourself to the depthful spirit relationship, and disciplining the magical body. So it's all going to be done through either pre-recorded video presentations. You'll get 6 of those, and also we'll have 6 weekly live group meetings where we'll build the community together. There's a workbook, there's a private Facebook group, and you'll get a one-on-one coaching session with me to integrate it all. So here's the deal. The course is still enrolling officially until next week, but actually it's pretty much full. Like, I may have 1 or 2 spots left. I have to look at my numbers, but you know, I don't want to turn anybody away. So if you think you want to enroll, I really encourage you to follow the link below, or to follow the link that Viv just put in the chat, and apply as soon as possible. Everything is there, all the details that I don't have the time to go into right now, but it's all there on the page, the prices, what you get, meeting times, etc., etc. But what I want you to know is that I've made the course really affordable for most folks, and that I'm also offering scholarships as well as payment plans. So go to the link, learn more about it, and just know that I totally believe in the magic of what I'm offering, and so I guarantee all of my courses. So if you participate wholeheartedly in the first week, and if you do the work in the workbook and participate with a group, but you don't really feel like you're getting any value from it, then email me at the end of that first week and request a refund. No, easy peasy, no problem. All right, so we're going to complete, and for those of you who've been with me all 6 weeks, I hope you have found the love, the wisdom, and the power to step more fully into your extraordinary selves and relationships. And for those of you who have missed some of these sit and sips, you can go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Megan Rose, and catch up. And I'm going to put that right here. In the chat. So you can go there and watch all of these recordings for free, and I'll be posting the one from today shortly. So thank you for sitting and sipping with me these past few weeks. Ultimately, the message that I want to leave you with is this: you are an extraordinary being yourself, and cultivating your extraordinary capabilities and contacts is so worth it. So thank you, everyone. It's been my honor to serve you and to talk with you these past few weeks. I'll be available to take any questions for a few more minutes. So if you have anything that I didn't cover that you wanted addressed, feel free to pop it in the chat. Otherwise, many blessings. All right, let's scroll through over here and see what have we got? Okay, so we were chatting about being jealousy and exclusivity. Jealousy is not exclusive it's not synonymous with being exclusive. That's so true, Deborah. Polyamory, half of polyamory is negotiating jealousies and really learning clear communication about it, and learning how to deal with it, because jealousy comes up. It's just a natural thing. And the reason that I just discourage working with spirit lovers that are jealous is it just, adds a layer of complication that, like, you have to really navigate. That if you don't have to take that on, why take it on? I mean, that's my personal opinion. Now, you may disagree and say, it's worth it, and the being is worth it, and that's totally fine and legit. I just don't have the time for jealous spirits. That's just my personal opinion. So, Robin says, my lover always tells me he would make room for someone else if I choose. If it wasn't like this, I wouldn't be with him. Beautiful. And I'm assuming that's your spirit lover? Maybe not, but either way, great. All right. Okay. I know your spirit doesn't like Apollo, or especially my interest in Apollo. Yeah, so there is... The person that I was talking about before that was married to a Norse deity had sort of the same issue with the Greek pantheon. So she's married to a Norse deity, and he had issues with Zeus in the Greek pantheon, and like didn't want her working with Zeus, but was fine with other spirits because she was married to him. I'll just say it was Odin. She's married to Odin. She's also married to a whole host of other spirits in other pantheons. There were just certain spirits that he didn't really want her working with. Now, we may think that's jealousy, but there also may be actually physical, or energetic body reasons for this. There may be a certain energy that she runs working with Odin that is not compatible with working with Zeus. We don't know, right? We don't want to necessarily assume that reason is just out of pure jealousy. All right, so let's see. All right, doesn't look like there are any more questions, so I am going to sign off now. Thank you, everyone who has been with me these 6 weeks and who's watching these in after the fact. You can always visit my website, drmeganrose.com, to learn more. May you have a wonderful fall and winter season, and I'll see you again in the spring.